Okay, Erev Tov, everybody. It's Monday, November 28th, 2022. Daled Kislev, almost Olehei Kislev. I'm Riva Muna. We're recording live from Tzfat. So we'll just see how long we're going to keep learning tonight. It's not our normal schedule. We have a full day learning tomorrow, Tuesday, and also Thursday. It's just my Rebbe, one of my Rebbe, Rebbe Sloanamer, he taught that when you feel the chaos and you feel the chaos coming, run to the one, run to the only one, right? Run to the base medrash. In other words, find refuge, take refuge in the light, in the wisdom, in the consciousness. It's not just maps of consciousness, the Torah, it actually is light contained within the letters of the Torah. It's access to light. So that's what we're doing. I don't know about you, but these Chavlei Mashiach are feeling a little strong. Okay, so please God, we're going to begin with oh, hi honey, yay. Perfect timing. Okay, so we'll see how deep and how far we're going to go tonight. I have a stack of Svarim next to me, so we're definitely not challenged for Homer. So we are in the Sloanamer Rebbe, the Netivot Shalom, Parshat Veyetze, and I thought, there's just so much to do. I wanted to give an overview of Veyetze, and I certainly want to still do that. Oh my goodness, there's just so much. I don't even know where to begin. So I'm thinking that maybe we could begin with the ladder, right? The Sulam in Yaakov's dream this week. And of course, so beautifully, everything weaves together. This is the Chodesh of Kislev, and it is the elevating and the birurim and the fixing of sleep, the large intestine, and a part of sleep, of course, is dreams. And then we also have our daydream. So we're really working with the koach hamidameh, right? On the one side, right? It's the same energy, but on the one side, it's the energy of delusion and illusion. From the word dimyon, from the word domeh, right? It looks like something that we're yearning and longing for, but it's encased in maybe a different form, or maybe it still has some unrectified layers of midot, right, woven into it. So from dimyon, medamed, we have here Likutei Maharan. That's our next stop to look at koach hamedameh. Hopefully also learn some Torah from the Heliga Arizal on what is the koach hamedameh, what is imagination, what is dreaming. Right? We have waking imagination and sleeping imagination, and what is this? It's another hush, it's another sense that we have, and it's like any other sense. It can be used in a way of creating more dveikut, or more intimacy and closeness with a source of all life, right? Or it can put up more walls, more veils, more barriers, right? So one of the themes that's going to keep coming up again in this month is the idea of removing the orla, right? The orla is the energy of it's not a nice word, so I'm trying to think of a better word. the energy of self-serving, of being self-serving, on the one hand, and also what we also might call in the language of 12 steps, right, our character defects, and in the language of Kabbalah and Hasidut, our midot, right, our unbalanced emotional responses, cravings, impulses, desires, triggers, reactions, right, that can cloud present connection and true connection. Okay, so let's jump in. Okay. Oh, what a wonderful group. Hi, everybody. Okay, so, and let me just remind, because some of you I have not learned with over Zoom, please feel free to unmute at any time and ask a question. Sometimes you'll see me jump. It's because I'm deep in the learning and I get startled, don't worry. Or if you don't feel comfortable to do that, so you could write your questions in the chat box, and periodically I'll look up and check the chat box for questions, clarifications about what we're learning, things that are deeper and more personal. I'm happy to answer questions in the end. Okay, great. Okay, so we are in Parshat Veyetze, in the Ma'amar, in Yan Hasulam. Okay, what is this ladder in Yaakov's dream? Okay, so it begins with Vayachalom, and Yaakov has a dream. Right, that's the whole shiur, right? Just again for our notes, right? Just noticing the connection between the shoresh, right? The three-lettered root and energy root center, right? Chet and lamed and mem sofit, right? Halom, which is a dream. And we're going to keep seeing this showing up as lechem, as in bread, as in Beit Lechem, where Binyamin is born. And of course, Binyamin is the tribe of this month, right? And the word lochem, to wage war, to fight. And right, what is the connection between dreams and fighting and bread? And right, in the simplest manner, we're going to understand that a dream is giving us a vision of potential when it goes through the whole Seder Hishtalshalus, the order of operations, and it actualizes, right? So that's something that we might maybe call, right, a dream. We're seeing the unfolding process of a seed of potential. We call that koach in the language of Kabbalah and Hasidut. And the order or system of operations, and remember, in a dream, everything is sped up, right? Because we can be asleep 15 minutes and dream 70 years worth of information. We can dream a whole life. So there's something about a chalom, a dream, that gives us, and we've been speaking about this a lot, what we call kvitzat haderech, right? A leaping over of the way. And another way that we might say that is quantum leaps in consciousness. So there's quantum leaps in our consciousness and what we're able to receive and what we're able to perceive and what we're able to integrate and where we're able to hold. But there's also quantum leaps, so that in the Seder Hishtalshalus, in other words, the order and system of operations of how potential is birthed into actual or manifest, right? So even in that process, when there's a kvitzat haderech, right, a shortening of the order of operations, we often refer to that as a nes, as a miracle, right? Suffering is the opposite. Suffering is when the Seder Hishtalshalut is expanded, right? And every step, it takes such a long time, right? And we call that, again, the Hebrew word sevel, suffering, and the Hebrew word sablanut, patience, right? As it works, as we work through the blocks, as we work through the veils, as we adjust to the new vibrations, as we open the third pathway, right? Because that's always going to be the new path, right? We know the polarities. We're usually stuck somewhere between the polarities, and we're about to enter a new pathway, which we don't know because it's new, right? And this is the whole thing that's happening with Yaakov, right? He's going to go from Yaakov, the heel, to Yisrael, right? Which is basically Shir El, right? He's learning Shirul Hashem Shir Chadash. He's learning a new song, and this is mamash a new song in the whole world, because this is a song of how do we harmonize the polarities, right? Even Abraham was a polarity to the right, and Yitzhak was a polarity to the left. But now what Yaakov is doing is like the middle path. He's opening something, and this is at the risk of being misquoted, please don't misquote me. It is something very uniquely a part of the Jewish mission. Even though it's true that the Buddha spoke about the middle path, and many traditions spoke about the middle path, we'll just leave it as such for now. There is something about opening a new path of harmony and synthesis. And what that new path is also going to be is a change in nature. What do we mean by a change in nature, right? Well, it's all symbiotic and we're all interconnected. So when our midot change, when our nature changes, our inner nature, remember that it's a song, it's a vibration, right? So let's say we are singing the song, the compassionate song of the universe, that has a direct and immediate effect on all levels of consciousness, all worlds. That's what we call it in Kabbalah and Hasidut, worlds, olamot, right? And in turn, that actually affects nature as we know it, teva, in this world, right? Such as, right, the lion and the lamb lying down with each other, right? That's a new nature for both of them, right? It's still happening in nature because there's still animals running around, and yet something has transpired that has allowed a new relationship that wasn't possible before, because we were polarized in prey and predator. And something new and expansive and peaceful and harmonious and wider and deeper, right, is birthing and is opening and is stretching, that is allowing new ways of connecting, new natures for all of us, if you will. Okay, I'm going to pause here before we jump into the text, just to see if anybody has a question or needs something clarified. No? Okay. Okay, so let's go into the text. Okay. Sorry, you'll hear some noise going in and out as I'm turning my heater off and on. Okay. Vayachalom, and he dreamt, Yaakov dreamt. Vehine, and behold, Sulam, a ladder. Now, just a little cute wink from Chazal. Yeah, it's a ladder, but in Hebrew, when we say a musical scale, like, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, right? That's also called a sulam. So just keep in mind that we're layering through here also images of tones and sounds, color spectrums, sound spectrums that are moving us within different levels of consciousness, different worlds, different levels of reality, different possibilities of connection, of opening, of closing, right? Tones in our body, areas of our body, systems in our body. Okay, so that's just like a beautiful thing. It's just that word sulam. Yes, it's a ladder. So Chazal come and say, the Mekubalim come and say, on one level, that this ladder was Yaakov's spine, right? And when we're talking about the angels, right, descending and ascending, we're talking about, again, the flow of the chiyut, the essential life force. In other systems, right? Kundalini energy, it's all the same thing. Okay, it's just we want to keep it in kedusha v'tahara, but at its oneness, at the tachlit, we're talking about, of course, the one and only or Ein Sof. Okay, so he says here, v'yachalam v'hine sulam matzav arza, and he saw a ladder that was rooted onto the ground, right? Was planted on the ground. V'rosho megia hashamayma, and the head, right, of the ladder, right, is in the heavens, right? V'hine malachei Elokim olim v'yordim bo, and it says angels of Elokim. Now let's just stop right there and say that the Kabbalists and the Holy Masters teach us that what we mean by angels, and if you would like a deeper description into angels, the Ramchal, Rabbi Moshe Chaim of Luzzatto, has a book called The Way of God, or Derech Hashem, and there's wonderful teachings in there on what are angels. Okay, but the short version of what are angels is they are forces of energy, right? So there's an angel, so to speak, of lightning. There's an angel of thunder. Now, of course, there's only the one energy, Hashem. Right. So when we say Malachei Elokim, you'll notice that Elokim is the language of plurality, forces, right? And it's all coming from the one force, but delegated, right? So there's a force of rain, and there's a force of the ocean waters, and there's the force of the winds, and okay. So it says, but here when we say Malachei Elokim olim v'yordim, so many of the holy masters teach, again, these are energies moving up and moving down Yaakov Avinu, his spine. So again, like we talked about, right? I'm sorry, I don't have a good Hebrew term for Kundalini energy, but it's awakening the sfilot, right? The energy centers in the body, and remembering always that the this sulam here, right, is going to represent the column of da'at, of consciousness, of presence, of connection, of awareness, of current present time, right? And the other thing we're going to get to notice is that this is kind of a thing that he does all the time, Yaakov, because remember, his name is Yaakov, which has the word in it, ekev, or a heel. And then when he graduates into integrated consciousness of both his light and his dark, he receives a new name at his graduation ceremony, Yisrael, which of course you're going to find inside the word Rosh, or head, right? So we're really talking about the full spectrum of energies and of consciousness, first and foremost within the human body, right? So the bottom of the ladder is going to be dealing with what we call the lower energy centers. Literally, on the color spectrum, it's going to be like the energies of black, of red, of orange, yeah, right. And then when we start to get into the center area, Tiferet, we get more into the yellows and yellow greens, and then the blues and the purples and white, okay, in our body. And of course, each one of those colors is connected to sound vibrations, to tones, and therefore to ways that we experience openness, ability to perceive, receive, channel, hold, birth, light, consciousness, awareness, potential. Okay. Remembering again, the idea of the sulam also being the musical scales. Now, just remember that musical scales, when we talk about Shemot Hashem, names of Hashem, one of the interpretations of names of Hashem through the Holy Masters is a series of musical tones that, in other words, that are opening the vessels, right? Opening us, expanding us, stretching us to be able to receive more light, channel more light, hold more light, right? And well, just off the bat, something that we'll notice, anybody who has a musical background. So we have, for example, in Western music, we have minor scales and we have major scales. And for example, in the minor scales, we're going to have some of the air or sound tone blocked, diminished, right? Like a minor third or a minor fifth, right? It means there's a tzimtzum. We call that din. The vessel is being constricted, and therefore the flow that's allowed through it is diminished and is diminished, and therefore it has a melancholy, sad tone, which is going to be really important when we speak later about Leah and her sadness, and that she's really in her rectified state. She's Bina, which is joy. But what is this experience of the diminishment of love and the diminishment of light? Okay, good. So back to the ladder. Okay, so here's the ladder, and it says, right, angels of Elohim. Elohim is always going to be giving us again the perception of the one experiencing. So in this case, Yaakov, right, of Hashem in wearing the hat, kivyachol, so to speak, of cause and effect and of judgment, right? In other words, cause and effect and judgment. Okay, and the laws and the rules and the constrictions of the rules of nature, both the laws of physics and also the laws of metaphysics. Okay, so here he is. Olim v'yordim bo. That's why the Mekubalim say, the bo here means Yaakov. That these energies are at the ladder is Yaakov, particularly it's Yaakov's spine. It's Yaakov's da'at, right? It's the Eitz HaChaim within him. And the Olim v'yordim are the energies as, right, he's going up and down in consciousness. And remember, we started to say before, he does this, and he does it his whole life, because even after he gets his new name, Israel, it's not a one-time thing. Like he was Yaakov, now he's Israel. You'll notice, and the Torah wants us to notice, the name changes when he goes Yaakov, Yisrael, and then he's Yisrael again, and then Yaakov again, and right? This is when he's moving, toggling, and this is something we've been speaking about a lot lately, about how it feels to birth a new story, a new song, a new perspective, a new name, because it gets a new name, a new way of being in the world, is that we toggle, right? He goes Yaakov, Israel, Yaakov, maybe Yaakov again, right? In other words, he's in diminished consciousness, or the old story, the heel story, right? And then he's opening into something new, and then he goes back into Yaakov. And this is what's happening with me now. I think it's happening with other people, right? It's this toggling of how we become something new, how we grow and elevate, how we become a new being, and with a new way of responding in our speech and I should say in our thoughts, I should say in our will, and how our will changes and how our thoughts change and how our speech changes and how our feelings and our midot get rectified and our bodies change. Oh, chat box. Okay, let me see. Toggle is a great word. Yes, change and evolution. Right. Yes. Okay, so here we see him toggling. Okay, and it's interesting, right? He goes up and down, and it says bow. It's happening on him and inside of him. Okay. Vehine, and behold, Hashem nitzav alav. And yet when he looks up, he sees the divine presence at the top of the ladder, right? We might call that keter, right? Okay, so in other words, we might call that Shari Bina. We might call that the 50th gate, and we might call that Chen or grace. In other words, there's our vessel, and there's the work that we do to toggle and to grow new consciousness. But there's something waiting at the top to pull us through the portal, to pull us out of the birth canal, right? Or pull the baby out. I mean, we're mixing billions of metaphors here, and it's all good, right? Right, to bring us into the state of grace. And by grace, we mean a force, a benevolent force that's greater than my own power and greater than my own abilities, and responds in response to my maximum effort that I'm capable of doing as a human being, but still it has a ceiling, right? And on top of that ceiling, Nitzav Hashem, right? There's Hashem's grace is waiting there to elevate the moment, the story, the situation into something bigger than my ability to elevate it. Okay, hope that's clear so far. Questions, comments? Okay. Ita b'midrash Rabbah samechet yud bet. Oh, I love when he switches into Aramaic. All right, here we go. Tane bar kapra v'hine sulam ze hakeves mutzav arza ze mizbeach adama ta'aseli v'rosho megia hashamayma ilu hakorbonot shereichan olel shamayim. Ooh, he's taking this in a whole new direction. Okay, so he says, Bar Kapara said that this ladder is the sheep. Let's just see where he's going with this. And the fact that the sheep is planted on the ground is referring to the Mizbeach, or the altar. Mizbeach adama ta'aseli, right? Form for me an altar made out of dirt or earth, adama. Ve'rosho megia hashamayma, but the head reaches up into the heavens. Elu hakarbanot shereichan oleh l'shamayim. He says, these are the sacrifices, and their smell goes all the way up to Shamayim. Wow, that's just like so much right there. So I saw in a sefer this week, Likutei Maharan. I forgot which Torah it is. We'll look it up. Zot Hashem. And Rabbi Nachman teaches there that korbanot. This is so beautiful. Ready? Ooh, korbanot are the sufferings and the shatterings. He calls them the shvarim, the shatterings that we go through, right? We don't have korbanot now in an actual building called the Holy Temple in Yerushalayim, But because we are the holy temple, Rabbi Nachman was asking, so how do we makriv korbanot today? How do we offer this thing, which is such a terrible translation, sacrifices? It's just such a terrible translation. What it is how do we elevate our animal instincts, which can contain a lot of fear and cruelty, right? Prey and predator, victim perpetrator energy. And what korbanot do is bring those energies and place them on the mizbeach. And with the help of the Kohanim, remember the Kohanim are always holding the energy of wholeness, shlemut, shalom, and ahava, love. Bring those parts home, reintegrate them, put them back into their proper perspective within us, right? Because there's some korbanot that we eat. In other words, there's some levels of animal nature that we're able to really integrate that we need, right? Strength, power, passion, protectiveness, right? These are animal instinctual natures that we can elevate them. Right? In other words, what do we mean by elevate? It's just energy. And what we can refine the intention behind the energy and with what means, with what aim to dip into and use that energy. And that's called korbanot from the sense that we are makriv, but it creates, restores wholeness from the word lekarev, to draw near, to restore closeness, kirva. Kirva means nearness, closeness. It's very beautiful that in Kabbalistic and Hasidic terms, when it says we're far from Hashem or near from Hashem, the holy masters, the Kabbalists, the Kubalim ask, what does that mean to be near God or far from God, right? What does that mean? So the holy masters teach, in the language of spirituality, likeness creates closeness. So if Hashem is kind and benevolent and compassionate, and we act in a manner that's kind and benevolent and compassionate, then we're more like God, and therefore we're closer, as opposed to being a polar energy, that if Hashem is loving and kind and compassionate and we're acting in a state of, God forbid, right, but of violence and cruelty, then ki'ilu, so to speak, we're farther from God, because our essential expression of energy is so different. So in the language of Kabbalah and Hasidut, to be near to God, a korban, lahakriv ki'uva, means to come back to being a being that is closer to divinity, right? In its expression. So more whole, more integrated, more creative, more loving, more compassionate. Okay. Good. Okay. So that's a lot, right? We did a lot. Okay. So he says like this. Vehine Malache Elokim Elu Kohanim. So here he's saying the angels, these forces going up and down. In this case, he's learning it out as these are the Kohanim, these are the priests. Olin v'yordim bo, shehem olin v'yordim bakeves, that they're going up and down on the sheep. V'hine Hashem nitzav alav, and the energy of the Creator, the One, right, is standing above and at the top of and over this. Ra'iti et Hashem nitzav ala hamizbeach. That's from Amos, right? And I saw Hashem standing over the mizbeach, over the altar. Rabbanan patrim le b'Sinai. V'yachalon v'hine sulam zeh Sinai. Oh, this is so beautiful. Okay. So it says our holy masters learned this out, that another way to learn out the sulam or the ladder is that it's also representing Sinai, Har Sinai, Mount Sinai. Now, again, we want to remember any place in Torah, like a name of a city, a name of a place, is inviting us into understanding that, number one, we're going to find this place in our physical body, right? For example, the city of Luz is in the Luz bone on the back of the neck. Right? We Mitzrayim, Meitzarim, the constricted straits. We're going to find that both in our throat. That's the like kind of an upper Mitzrayim, and the lower Mitzrayim would be the birth canal. Right? Any of these places we're going to find in our physical body, and they're also going to be representing states of reality, states of consciousness. Right, so that when Moshe encounters the sneh, bo'el, be'esh ve'enenu ukal, when Moshe encounters the burning bush that's burning but not being consumed, that is also talking about a spiritual, inner meditative experience. The sneh as being inside the top of the sulam, of the ladder. Does anybody want to ask a question up until now? Wow, we have such an amazing, lovely group. Okay, so he says like this. So he's telling us that the holy masters learned out that that there was this dream, and there's a ladder, and that the ladder here is the same spiritual experience as what we're calling Sinai or Har Sinai or Mount Sinai. In other words, what does that mean? Revelation, right? Revelation, right? It's the same experience. Remember when Hashem's presence comes and rests on Mount Sinai, and it comes with kolot, or the sounds of the shofar, and we know that there was synesthesia there. So, right, we saw the sound tones, and we heard the lights. That's called synesthesia, right? And here he's saying there's something similar is going on in this dream. In other words, Yaakov is having a spiritual experience and is being activated. Please forgive me, I don't have a better word than kundalini. It's the Jewish kundalini, okay? So I don't know how else to say it. In other words, all of his energy systems are being open, are being activated, and he's learning that there's higher energies within him, higher impulses within him, lower energies within him, lower impulses within him. And he's discovering, wow, I have the lower bass part of me, literally bass as in coarse, and literally bass as opposed to alto or soprano, right? And I have those parts in me, those tones, those colors, those sounds, those vibrations, which are going to be obviously more earthy and more survival oriented, and even the colors are going to be reflective as such, so that there'll be the reds of blood, of the pulsating life force of my heart, of right, just dam, right, adama, dam, right, that's the most primal life force, survival instincts, right? And he's discovering, like, wow, I'm part animal, I'm part angel, and then in between, I'm this thing that I'm becoming called human, which somehow flows and connects animal nature and divine. Because remember, the Hashem nitzav alav, then there's angels going up and down, and at the top, there's something holding it all, right? Something called Hashem nitzav alav, right? Some unifying, one source, one life, one force, oneness, with the or Ein Sof. And how do we harmonize all of this, right? So he says like this: Desulam samich lamed men gematria Sinai samich yud nun yud. Okay, so he says, because the word ladder or scale, musical scale or ladder, remember it's the same thing, is numerologically the same as Sinai, as in Sinai, right? As in the spot for revelation. Again, remembering actual Mount Sinai in the desert, yes, but also Sinai or Sinai within us as the location of consciousness, of revelation within us. Checking the chat box. Okay, so making sure. Again, please feel free at any time to unmute, to ask a question, to ask for clarification. If you feel more comfortable writing in the chat box, then I'll periodically check the questions. Okay, matzav arza, and the ladder is firmly planted on the ground. Vayityatzvu betachtit hahal. And he says, so now he's toggling, okay? And he's going back and forth, and he's showing us that this dream with the ladder or the scale is exactly mirroring and paralleling the spiritual revelation that happened at Sinai. Okay, so he's saying, just as the ladder was planted firmly on the ground, right, grounding Malchut, so also at Mount Sinai, it says, and they were gathered around the foot of the mountain, right? So he's going back and forth between these two experiences. Verosho megia hashamayma, and the head of the ladder was up in the heavens, it reached the heavens. And he's flipping back to Mount Sinai and saying, and when it came to Mount Sinai, v'hahau bo'el ba'esh ad lev hashamayim, and the mountain was on fire until the very heart of the heavens. Okay, again, he's giving us an experience of revelation of consciousness, right? Revelation of when the veils are lifted and we have an experience of direct hashgacha pratit, divine providence, a direct experience. There's different levels of direct experience, right? There's Ruach HaKodesh, there's prophecy, Nevuah, there's different levels that the veil is open to. But here he's talking about, okay. Vehine malachei Elokim olim v'yordim bo elu Moshe ve'Aharon. And he says, in Yaakov's dream, right, it was angels that were ascending and descending, and on Mount Sinai, those angels were Moses and Aaron, were Moshe and Aaron. He's saying it was a mirrored experience of elevation of consciousness and what it looks like, right? So it has these qualities. It has these qualities that there's a top and there's a bottom, there's a grounding and there's a reaching for the heavens. There's something greater and bigger standing and hovering over all of it. And there's some kind of scale and gradation and spectrum of colors and of lights and of consciousness and experience and awareness, from the lowest and most constricted to the most whole and integrated, going up and down and connecting these two polarities of heaven and earth. Okay, questions? Which text source am I reading from? Okay, thank you. I am reading from the Sloanamer Rebbe, also called the Netivot Shalom, and his name is Rebbe Shalom Noach Bruzovsky from Slonim, and we are in Parshat Veyetze, and we are in the Ma'amar, or the teaching, beginning in Yan Hasulam, the matter of the ladder. Ooh, matter of ladder, like that. Okay, Nativot Shalom, one of my very famous, very favorite Rebbes. Okay, so he says, "V'hinei malachei Elokim olim v'yordim bo elu Moshe v'Aaron v'hinei Hashem nitzav alav v'yarad Hashem al har Sinai al rosh har." And again, he says, and when it came to the ladder, at the top of the ladder, Hashem's presence is hovering there and standing over him in this protective presence. He says that's the same thing that happened at Mount Sinai when it says that Hashem's presence descended upon the mountain on the top or the head of the mountain. Right? He says it's this. We're talking about mirrored spiritual experiences. Okay, so he says. Bet mashma'ut divrei hamidrash, or be mashma'ut divrei hamidrash, yesh lomar, tehine le'ayol mina ita sham b'midrash al hapasuk vayifga b'makom. Okay, so now he says, wow, okay, that's this beautiful, deep teaching and midrash, right? And he says, come, let's understand what are the words of this midrash, of this teaching. Remember, midrash is the language of music and poetry and literature. So it's not the rational mind midrash. Midrash is using color, symbol, light, sound, poetry, right, to give us not the rational true experience something, but the experienced whole being truth of something. Okay, so it says yesh lomar tehine le'ayol mina ita sham b'midrash ala pasuk vayifga b'makom. And he says, remember, we have this very strange teaching in this week's parsha. Yaakov's walking along, right? Vayifga b'makom, and he bumps up against a place, right? He's like, he thinks he's going somewhere, and suddenly a place comes and bumps up against him. So vayifga has several meanings. Let's just start with that word, vayifga. Vayifga, okay, so some say vayifga means, oh, he prayed there. Very interesting, because the first thing we'll notice about the word vayifga is the word pega, wounding. He bumps up against something, almost like tripping in the dark or bumping into like the coffee table, right? Vayifga, he gets wounded by bumping up, coming up against the place. So the first thing we notice is the place, hamakom, is a way that we address Hashem, right? The infinite source of light, the creator. And it's a very particular, it's very intentional when we talk about Hashem in what name we use, right? The Torah is always trying to get our attention by using this name of Hashem or that name of Hashem. So here we're referring to Hashem in the name of the place. Hashem is the place. And Yaakov has this experience of encountering the place. So what's the place? Is it the inner space? Is it the seat of consciousness? Is it the meditative experience? Hey, we don't know yet. Bikesh la'avor v'na'aseh ha'olam kulo kemin kotel lefanav. Okay. It says here again, there's many meforshim here, and here it says that all of reality in that moment was placed in front of him as some type of a wall. That's why he comes and he's bumping up against hamakom, meaning levels of consciousness now are meeting, and he's bumping up against the wall of reality or the wall of illusion, right? We don't know yet. Bumping up against a wall. You can feel that, right? Where he's in a certain level of growing consciousness, and suddenly he comes up, vayifuga b'makom, he comes up against a different reality, right? He can, and this is by the way, the work of Kislev, right? When we're coming up against our dimyonot, we're coming up against our, we want light, we want connection, we want love, we want veikut, we want healing, right? We want wholeness. But then there's also stories of what that looks like and what that means, that we bump up against the stories. We bump up against the limiting stories. We bump up against the false ideas. We bump up even against our spiritual dreams that are too small, too formed, right? Too specific. And we bump up against them. So this is happening to Yaakov, okay? He's bumping up against the wall. Yaakov Avinu, bakol shnotav, ad seto lecharan, because Yaakov Avinu, all of the years of his life, until he set off for this journey to Haran, haya beveit Yitzchak ve'etzel ever. He grew up in Yitzchak's house, and then he was learning Torah by Shem and Ever, right? Which some people say was Tzvat, who knows? Ubeotam hashanim, and during that, and throughout those years, haya kodesh kadoshim kemalachim usrafim, right? He was like in monk school, right? If you will, right? He was involved in meditative practices. He was involved in purifying his mind and his emotions and his body and his relationship being, right? He was basically deeply involved in growing consciousness and in purifying consciousness all of those years. And now, vayifga b'makom, now he's going to see all this consciousness that I was working on. Now it's hitting up against olam asiyah. Now it's hitting up against dating, getting married, having children, working, making parnasa, dealing with crooked people, dealing with cruelty, dealing with murder, dealing with manipulations, dealing with trickery, right? And can you imagine, right? Those two things meeting, right? This person who's worked on deep spirituality and elevation and seeing the world through the eyes of light and wholeness and oneness. And now what happens when we try to apply that into the lowest levels of consciousness, into olam asiyah, right? And into not just a normal reality, but the basest of human nature, right? What's going to happen to him? How does he integrate those two worlds? How does he integrate upstairs and downstairs, right? Because there's many outcomes. It can split him, right? It can shatter him. It can shatter his, God forbid, right? It can shatter his vessels. It can make him go crazy, right? Lose his mind. It can make him just choose the path of monkhood and forget the world, or choose the path of the world and forget spirituality, right? And what he's trying to do now is, oh my goodness, right? How do we put these together? Right? This is all the work of Yaakov Avinu. So these Parshiot, when we're looking at Yaakov and Yaakov Yisrael, and this is us, to be clear, right? Yaakov is a partsuf, an archetype of Psyche within us as well, and an energy that we encounter within ourselves and with our own spiritual journey and spiritual elevation, right? So we really want to know what's happening here with him. Again, questions? Anybody? Okay. All right, so he says like this. So now something really profound is happening. Kadoshenu Kadosh Yaakov, right? That Yaakov Avinu is also going to be bringing down and purifying and working with this energy that's called Kedusha. Right? So when we say Kedusha, when we say holiness, it really doesn't cut it. Maybe it would be better to say that intentional and intimate connection that's held in intentionality and in wholeness and in nothing is treated dishonorably or casually. Kedusha is the opposite of whole. Whole means the sand, right? The sand on the side of the ocean. So it has a level of diminishment and casualizing something, right? For example, right? Casual physical intimacy. Yeah, whatever. It's just like a need, whatever, right? Not from a place of moral judgment, from a place of taking what essentially is the creative life force. And instead of Kedusha is to have reverence for the enormous power that we're encountering, and how do I wield this power? How do I interact with this power? How do I integrate this? How do I dance with this? And there's a reverence around it. There's an honoring of its uniqueness, of its preciousness. And the opposite is whole, right? Nothing's precious. Nothing's precious. When we say Hamavdil ben Kodesh l'chol, whole is the energy of casualizing, right? There's a million of this and there's a million of that. It doesn't, it's the opposite of being intentional and focused. It's the opposite of choosing. It's the energy of just kind of allowing things to show up in my path and then using them, discarding them, right? So we call that whole. So here, Yaakov is the opposite. He's on this search for, I understood when I was in the base medrash of shame and ever, I understood Kedusha. I understood wholeness. But in a way, it wasn't really whole because I didn't have to integrate it with what we might call a householder life, right? Being married, having children, raising children, cleaning my house, going out to work, caring for my body, dealing with relationships, dealing with physicality, dealing with eating, dealing with money, right? It's like, this is a whole new arena of how do I apply expanded consciousness in these stories that, number one, are going to frighten me, are going to trigger me, are going to bring me into my own fears and jealousies and lacks and survival drives, and right. So this is where Yaakov is coming from. Shehaya mufrash lechalutin beiskei olam hazeh v'nitkadesh b'kedusha ila'ah. So we really kind of said this already, right? That up until now, Yaakov's experience of holiness was to detach from the world, to detach from relationships and from money and from sexuality and from work and jobs and family relations, and right? That's a certain kind of holiness. Ukedeita bechazal, and is brought down by our holy masters, shebechol Pei Dalij Notav, throughout his 84 years, Ad Shenasa Isha, until he got married. It's funny, we don't realize that Yaakov Avinu, when he got married to Leah, was 84 years old, right? I don't know, I always think of him as being this strong, handsome, Disney prince, and I'm sure he was strong and handsome and a Disney prince, but he was 84. And it's really powerful. Something that Shlomo Gadzi and I were talking about on the podcast about Chaye Sarah was, again, this really interesting exploration of the ages of when people are coming into their fullness, and it may not be like what we expect, right? Sarah is going backwards. She goes from 100 to 20 to 7. In other words, she's getting younger as time goes on. As she grows in, spiritually, she's getting older physically, maybe, but she's getting more and more beautiful and more new, right? She goes from 100 to 20 to 7. Her innocence is coming back. She's getting more and more innocent the more she grows and elevates spiritually, the more she integrates, the better her relationship with her husband gets, right? Her menses, her machzor comes back, right? But that's not just a literal machzor. It's the way she cycles through time and space and the world, right? It's really beautiful. וכן, מה שאמר חז"ל על הפסוק וישכב במקום ההוא שכב, אבל כל י"ד שנים שהיה נטמן בבית עבר לא שכב לישון, right? So it says, now this is the first time, it says he's 80, right? He's 84 years old, and he comes to this place that he thinks is Luz, but is really Moriah, and he lies down, and this is the first time that he lies down, right? All those years when he was learning Torah, again, is it literally he didn't lie down, or is it talking about, again, a state of awareness and consciousness? It says, okay, so this time it says, and he lies down to sleep. Ve'ata, and now, betseto mi be'er sheva charona. Okay, so again, the Torah wants us to perk up our ears and say, listen to where he's traveling from. He's going from Be'er Sheva to Haran. Harana means to Haran. Okay, so now we're going to immediately notice Be'er Sheva is the 7 wells. That by 7 wells, we mean the 7 energy centers, the 7 sfirot, not including Chabad, not including Chachma Bina Da'at, right? Beginning from Chesed, beginning from Avraham. So he's traveling from Be'er Sheva, from Chesed, Gvura, Tiferet, Netzach, Hod, Yesod, Malchut, those energy centers, dealing with those energy centers, opening and, right, being in open states of consciousness in those energy centers. That now he's traveling to Haran. And Chazal always want us to perk up our ears to notice the connection between Haran and Charon Af. By Charon Af is rage, violence, anger. In other words, states, very harsh states of Olam Hazeh, right? Again, Chazal make that connection to Harana, to Charon Af. Right, so now he's coming from Be'er Sheva to Harana. In other words, from this pristine state of the 7 energy centers being in alignment and in flow. But now he's going to encounter outside and inside circumstances that call up within him the midot, rage, anger, violence, fear, control, jealousy, right? Crookedness, dishonesty, manipulation. Okay. אחרי עבודה כזו וקדושה כזה, עליו להשפיל עצמו לעולם הזה, לבנות בית ולהוליד בנים ולעסוק בפרנסה. He says, right? He's like making this a conscious choice to become more and more enmeshed. And excuse me again, sorry, I know it bothers some people when I use secular or Indian terms. Don't always have the right terms, sorry. We might call it the galim, the galut, the galot, right? The cycles, but in other words of attachment, right? In other words, the more we engage with Olam Hazeh, the more we create energetic attachments, right? The more enmeshed we become in the story, the more invested we become in the story and in the dimyonot, in the dimyon, right? And that can feel very painful for an elevated soul, right? In other words, every choice, and this is true for us, every choice that we make to have a relationship, we're creating more karma with that person to work out. In other words, more energy bonds, more energy connections. Hopefully the connections are elevating, fixing, and healing. We call that tikkun. But it's kind of risky because sometimes what we end up creating is, God forbid, but more suffering, more attachment, more debts that we owe each other energetically. So this is like a really risky business that he's doing, descending, right? You notice that the malachim begin by descending from pure, high, innocent, whole, sweet natures and states of being, and agreeing to get down and dirty into human relationships and money and children and sexuality and marriage and parnasa, like, right, all these things that can have a really big toll on our spiritual states, on our emunah, our faith, on our ability to see the light right through and beyond these stories. Okay, so this is what he's doing this week. Okay. And this is very Jewish. Okay, to be fair, we find it also, I from my personal background, I happen to have more experience within Hinduism and Sikhism and Buddhism than many people that I encounter. So we do have states within those religions of things called like entering the period of being a householder, for example. But something that may be slightly different and also similar, but is that the ideal spiritual path is not to disconnect from physicality. And that's a challenging path, right? To invest everything with light and find the light in every story and reveal the light in every situation and integrate in every situation. Honest to God, it's a tremendous act of love. It's a tremendous act of love. Lekach ne'emad lefanav kol ha'olam kulo kekotel. And this is why the Sloanamer says that now he's vayifga b'makom. He's shocked. He's coming from this state of sweetness, of tmimut, of innocence, of wholeness, and he's encountering the world. Think about yourselves as a child, as a teenager, as a young adult, as a middle age, whenever it was that you had the experience of being a spiritual being, being in a certain state of wholeness and goodness and sweetness, and then experiencing the world in a way that fractured you, in a way that you came up against the basest of human nature, right? The cruelty, the abuse, the violence, the dishonesty, the lack of trust, right? And he says, this is what happens. This is vayifga. Now we're getting a hint from Chazal of why the word vayifga has inside of it the word lifgoa, to wound, right? V'hamei v'nyavim. Hainu shekol metziut ha'olam hazeh nizdakra lefanav kekotel she'ein la'avor be'ado. Right? He says all of a sudden he comes up against physical reality, olam asiyah. And it seems, what does it mean when it says a kotel? It seems impenetrable. It seems insurmountable, right? How do I apply spiritual principles to a system that's crooked, to a system that's prey and predator, to a system that supports victim and perpetrator? And you can see why he's vayifga, because this is the fork in the road for him. This is the moment of truth for all of us, right? What do we do? Do we run into the mountains? Do we run into a meditation cave? Do we go into humanitarian work? Do we break down in horror and shock at how ugly the world can be? Right? Do we curl up in a little ball? Do we die? Do we want to commit do we go into suicide ideation? Just get me out of here, get me out of here, right? And those are all good responses, because those are all human responses, right? That this is it. Here it is, right? How can I be an elevated spiritual being and be of this world and in this world? And how can I be in crookedness and not become crooked myself? How can I be in a world that objectifies women and not objectify myself or one another, right? Or not allow myself to be objectified? Like, how? And I know this. I think we all know this. I know this. I remember it started when I was really young, but I remember as a 14-year-old, the fork in the road of two realities. One telling me, stay whole in myself and stay whole in my connection to my femininity and my body and my creativity. And I was a musician. I played piano and I played violin and I created and I did art, and something else pulling me to shatter myself and to pretend to be something that I'm not, and to put on, if you will, Aesop's clothes, right? Hayadayim yadayim shel Esav, and to leave myself behind and become what society says is a woman, right? You have to weigh a certain amount and look a certain way and act a certain way and play certain games and manipulate certain ways and right. And then that's a fork in the road. That's vayifga b'makom. Now what? And eventually the vision is going to be shleimut, of course, right? Integration and a restoration of wholeness and a restoration of peace, right? But that's down the road, right? The first experience is vayifga, right? Like, oh my gosh, like I'm dealing with two different realities and two different principles. One is telling me kindness is very valuable. The other one is telling me, if you're too kind, you're a friar, right? Which is an Israeli term, which essentially means an easy mark or a sucker, right? Easily taken advantage of. Which one is it? And Yaakov's going to go through this whole journey, right? How do I become a whole person? And the graduating ceremony is going to be even more vayifga, even more shocking, when he's going to come up against P.S. These forces are not happening outside of me. These forces are happening inside of me. I myself have the drive for love and goodness and wholeness. I myself have the drive for violence and cruelty and separation, and right, and they're both existing inside of me. That's going to be his graduation ceremony. Hold on, checking the chat box. Okay, just wanted to make sure. Okay, good. And then how do I come to harmony with all those parts and all of those pieces without disowning and cutting off any experience, any part of myself? And Adarabba, on the contrary, bringing all the pieces back together to create something that is far more whole than the chesed of Avraham or the gvura of Yitzchak. Yeah, okay. All right, so he says, She'ad ko haya פירוש ממנו ולא הייתה לו כל שייכות אליו, ובפרט שעליו ללכת למקום כה טמא כבית לבן, right? So it's essentially really going over what we said already, right? Up until now, he just never had these experiences, and now he's being thrown not only into regular world, but the degree of a Lavan kind of world, right? A Lavan is the Lavan experiences is mamish vayifga, when we come up against the depths to which human beings can destroy, violate one another. I had that experience this week. It's not fun. And it's and by the way, it's like we want to keep this really real, right? So it's not just what other people do to us. It's also when we come up against what we're capable of doing and who we're capable of being, both in light and in shadow, right? Vayifga, that's a primal shock, wounding, right? Don't worry, it's only the beginning of the story. Would anybody like to ask a question or ask for clarification or up until now?
Is there anything? Hi, Reva. How are you? Hi. Nice to be back in class. Is there anything we can do to bring the Har Sinai into our spines and into our consciousness?
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. Let's just say for right now that we're going to get the Shema Yisrael, right? Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, yes. But could you ask that question again at the end, and maybe we'll even try a little meditation. If not tonight, then tomorrow. We'll just see where we end off. But yes, in other words, yes, thank you. We want to bring this into Kalim. Absolutely. Yeah, we want to bring this into Kalim. Thank you. Beautiful. Okay. Ve'al zeh harei ulo mina shamayim. And so they showed him from Shamayim. Again, remember, Shamayim isn't heaven. I mean, it could be, right? But by Shamayim, we mean Sham Esh V'mayim, the place where the whole mind, the place above duality. Sham Esh V'mayim, the two dualities live together harmoniously. That's called consciousness of Shamayim, Sham Esh V'mayim. V'hine sulam matzav artza v'rosh megia hashamayma. And behold, this sulam, again, this ladder, or again, this scale, right, of the full spectrum of human experience, from the lowest to the most sublime and elevated, and everything in between. And the intention behind this, leharot lo, was to show him shetachlit ratzon Hashem, at the highest, innermost point of will of our Creator. He is sheyehudi asok beinyanei olam hazeh, ubetoch zeh yimtza derech ech lihiot kadosh laHashem. Is to be inside the most earthy and human stories and reveal light there. Not stam, it's not for nothing that these Parshiot are coming in Kislev. It's the same energy, right? Where we're going to be lighting light, bringing light under the 10 shvachim, tvachim, right? Under, which is roughly the height of like a kitchen table, right? We can light lower than that, but we can't light higher than that on Hanukkah because we're in the direction of bringing light into the lower energy centers of the body, not disconnecting from them, but bringing light there. This is why Yaakov has to go into the consciousness of Padan Aram, into Haran, right? Into those spaces and find a way to find Dveikut, connection and wholeness. Now, this is not an overnight process, right? This is called the development of consciousness. And we develop consciousness by going down into Mitzrayim, by going down into Padan Aram and Haran, and we develop consciousness by having Har Sinai experiences, Mount Sinai, revelation, right? And we put them together, and then everything else in between. But he says, so he's tying this, he's going to tie this in now to Hanukkah, that remember that Hanukkah happens through the Kohanim, right, through the priests, and remember that the Kohen has a tzitz, has this wonderful sort of headband, and on it says Kadosh LaHashem, right, which really means activated for use for the highest divine will, within love and intimacy and wholeness, right? The Mei HaShiloach, the Ishbitzer Rebbe, the Mei HaShiloach, there's 3 Ishbitzer Rebbes, so this is the Mei HaShiloach, and he says the word Kedusha, Kadosh, means to be zamin, like a cell phone. It means to be activated, ready, right? Hineni, right? Ready for activation and ready to be in loving service. So he connects that to Kadosh LaHashem as like in service of the will of the Most High. V'zehu v'hinei sulam matzav arza. And he says, and now we might understand a little bit more that the ladder was planted on the ground, v'rosho magia hashamayma, and its head reached the heavens, Kedeita, the Torat Avot, and it's brought down in the Torah of the Avot, she'inyan hasulam, that the inner teachings of the ladder, more al kviut ha'avodah shel Yehudi be'olamo be'inyanei olam hazeh, right? That it's kind of talking about like having your feet firmly planted on the ground and your head, up in higher consciousness. In other words, again, this very challenging aspect of spirituality, to apply spirituality in the most challenging of situations, such as with our parents, with our children, with our partners, our soulmates, in work situations, around money, around how we eat, around physical intimacy, around our speech, around our community, right? Saying like that's when it gets really real. Right? It's not theoretical holiness. It's not theoretical knowledge. It's living applied Torah, right? Living light, living in integrity. שיהודי ימצא תמיד בתוך מסגרת של קדושה, בתוך הסולם, right? And that can we deal with things that are extremely earthy and allow ourselves to be connected, right? In other words, he's giving, for example, let's take the idea of sexuality, right? We're not saying disconnect from it, see it as something base, see it as something not holy, right? It says, no, it's the opposite. It's to join the light and the vessel, It's to join something very, very physical and earthy and infuse it with wholeness, right? The wholeness of this experience can grow compassion and connection and playfulness and sweetness and healing and restore us to wholeness and link our nervous systems in the best way, or right, the opposite. שיעלה דרגה, בתר דרגה עד בראשו מגיע השמיימה, אך גם בירידתו יראה להישאר בתוך גבול הקדושה, שלא ייפול החוצה מן המסגרת של קדושה. And again, he's saying the main circle that we're wanting to be within is the circle of this energy called Kedusha. Whether we're dealing with earthy matters, whether we're dealing with high levels of, Torah learning and prayer or whatever, meditation, right? You're saying the main thing is to be almost contained in this protective, beautiful light and energy called Kedusha. And by Kedusha, again, we mean that it has an honoring, it has a reverence, it has to treat everything with intention, with care, with awareness, with sensitivity of how we affect each other, right? What effect we have on each other, our actions, our intentions, our energies, our choices, right? So Kedusha is to have a very present and awake and aware sensitivity in those spaces. V'zehu omaro, v'hine malachei Elokim olim v'yordim bo. And this is why the Torah says that these energies of Elokim were rising and falling on him or within him. Kol aliyotehem v'yeridotehem hem basulam gufo. Right, and here he's saying, first and foremost, this is actually happening on an electromagnetic level, right, of energy impulses, neural impulses, the nervous system, right, neural impulses, right, going down and going up his spine, right? All the things that are triggering this desire, that response, say this, don't say that, do this, I want this, I don't want that, right? He's saying first and foremost, these energies are acting upon his spine, which is, of course is going to be connected to Da'at, right? The nervous system in the body. The nervous system in the body. I think it's very profound here to notice something happens to his nervous system. Vayifga b'makom, right? He's in a certain state of wholeness, and vayifga, right? Something happens to his nervous system in coming up against this reality, this level of reality, and he's going to embark on a healing journey, right? And it really is a healing journey. Now, I don't want to get too far off track, but to say Hod is the energy of healing. It's the energy of the Kohanim. It's the left leg. And the night that he gets his new name from Yaakov to Yisrael is Hod Shebehod, says the Ma'or Vashemesh. Rabbi Koloni Meskalman Epstein, Ma'or Vashemesh. That's the night that, remember, Vayifaga, that he's wounded in his left thigh, right? By coming up against the shadow of Hod. The shadow of Hod, by the way, is to feel victimized in this world, to feel unsafe, to feel one doesn't have a place, to feel a victim of the cruelty, of the prey-predator dynamic, of the victim-perpetrator dynamic. It's the back of Hod before Hod gets healed, right? Before it moves into Yehuda and Aharon HaKohen and okay. Question until then, that was a lot. Anybody have a question around any of that? Okay. So he says like this. V'zohi haderech gam be'inyanei ha'olam. And this is also our path when dealing with this world. Sorry, that's my phone ringing in the background. Shelo yetze michutz lemizkeret hakdusha. she'az achen inyanei olam hazeh motzi'im oto mikdushato u'mashpilim oto לדיוטה תחתונה, ורק על ידי שעושה לעצמו סולם, שמתנער מהארציות ונכנס למקום הקדוש למסגרת הקדושה, אז יביאו אותו גם כל ענייני עולם הזה, להתקרב להשם יתברך, להתרומם עדי בראשו מגיע שמיימה, ועד כי הנה השם ניצב עליו. Okay, I'm not going to delve so deeply into that. He's really, again, stressing that there's almost an inner core that can attach the bottom of the ladder to the top of the ladder. It's like a protective space. And he's calling that protective space the energy of Kedusha, right? So that if I go into the lower states, I go into the upper states, right? I whether in myself or outside of myself and outer circumstances, he's saying there's a way that we can begin to cultivate refuge, a state of energy, a state of consciousness of Kedusha, right? Of whatever it is that I'm going through, staying within a certain protective energy of reverence for all life, and an intimate and a faithful way of relationshiping with each part, right? Like Hare At Mikudeshit Li. Right, seeing, okay, we'll leave it there for right now. Okay, questions? Okay. ועל זה אמרו במדרש, תני בר קפרה, סולם מצב ארצה זה המזבח והכבש. דהנה מזבח רומז על עניין העבודה של יהודי בעולמו, שהמזבח הוא מקום העבודה שעליו שופכים דם לפני השם יתברך. Okay, so yeah, he took a turn I wasn't expecting. And he says, so the altar, the mizbeach, is talking about our devotional service in this world. וזהו המסגרת והסולם, העבודה והיגיעה צריכה להיות מסגרת הקדושה אשר המנה לא יוצאים. I'm going to go a little fast over this. העבודה של הכבש והמזבח, תחילתה ממוצב ארצה, שמתחיל ממדרגה קטנה מאוד לעלות על הכבש, ואחר כך מוסיף והולך ומתעלה דרגה בתור דרגה, עד בראשו מגיע שמיימה, ועד והנה השם ניצב עליו, וכתאית ראיתי את השם ניצב. Sorry, just going to skim over this kind of quickly. Sometimes I read a piece of Torah. I don't know how else to say it, but it just feels resonant to me more for the masculine. So I'm just not going to delve so deeply into that. But again, he's talking about the step-by-step process of developing and raising consciousness. והנה מלאכי אלוקים עולים ויורדים בו, שכל העליות והירידות הן בתוך המסגרת של עבודה, ואינו יוצא ממנו. Okay, again, I'm going to just finish this. את הציור הזה, הראו בחלום איך שיהודי נמצא גם בענייני עולם הזה, בתוך מסגרת של עבודה, שאז יכול הוא לעסוק בכל ענייני עולם הזה, ולהתקרב על ידם לאלוקות. Okay. I'm just seeing if he says something different in the end. Yeah, I'm just going to jump to the last paragraph here of this ma'amar. Let's check the time. Okay. Okay, so the last paragraph of this ma'amar, sorry, I'm skipping a few paragraphs, so that shouldn't throw anybody off who's following in the text. And we're in the last paragraph of this ma'amar. Umevo'al bazeh, and it's explained through this, inyan hachalom, right? The inside, what's going on with this dream. Sheheru leYaakov, so it was shown to Yaakov, v'hinei sulam motzav arza, this sulam is firmly planted in the earth, right? Eretz, arza, in the earth. Shalech ora, so it might appear, hare ikar hachalom haya, habrachot sheberchu hakadosh baruch hu, v'haya lo lehatchil miyad, v'hinei Hashem nitzav alav v'yomer ani Hashem Elokei Avraham v'chulei. He says, we might think that the whole point of this dream was the blessings that Hashem gave him, and that he needs to set off immediately. And we find that Hashem is standing over him, so to speak, right? In other words, there's a protection happening. And is saying, I am God, I am Hashem of Elokei Avraham, right? It says, Ele, but Hayanyan ka'amur shehe'ulo betchila et hatziur shel derech ha'avodah. He says, no, he's not, that's not the main point of the dream. He's showing him that consciousness is a path, that it's a ladder, that we move up and down, that there's ratzo v'shov, that there's running and returning, that the way consciousness goes also is, first of all, that when we're going to grow in consciousness, we actually yored, we go down in consciousness, like into Mitzrayim, right? Yerida, letzorech aliyah. That he's learning a lot about how elevation and integration of consciousness is a process, how there's ups and downs. It's not linear, right? It's ratzo v'shov. And he says, and he's showing him tziur shel derech ha'avodah, a symbol and an image for growing in consciousness. Shehu al davau sulam she'oleh midarga ledarga. And he's being shown that consciousness is a process, that it's a spectrum, like a rainbow spectrum of colors, of tones, of tastes, of sounds, of experiences, some darker and some lighter. And they return, right? They go, right? It goes down, we have an experience, and then we elevate that experience, and then we go down and we learn something new, and we weave that back in. And then he says, and as we go from level of consciousness to level of consciousness, we also encounter some spiritual maps, right? Some principles, which is really gonna help us actually. That these energy impulses, that the neural impulses, and that the energies that are moving within us and through us and around us, right? and these and also are propelling, right, different levels of consciousness. These energies are going down us and up us, right? We're also being affected by energies from within and from without that are bringing us into different states of consciousness, and through those experiences growing us, right? שגם הירידות יהיו בתוך המסגרת של קדושה, ולעולם לא יוצא מחוץ למסגרת, okay? שעל ידי זה זוכה לברכה של והנה אנוכי עמך, ושמרתיך בכל אשר תלך. I mean, he is encouraging us to try to stay within a certain protective energy called Kedusha v'Tahara, but he's also telling us that to remember that Hashem nitzav alav, that yes, we're going to go up and down the ladder, we're going to go up and down levels of consciousness, and yet to remember that there's a wholeness and a protection and ashkacha pratit, right, divine providence, that Hashem nitzav alav, that over, like to not have the illusion that we're alone in this journey, but we're being deeply held and deeply guided. V'yesh lomar, and some say, bazeh, ma'amar hakatuv, what it says in Tehillim Kaf Zayin, achat sha'alti me'et Hashem, there is one thing, or I'm asking for oneness. I'm asking for the tachlit, I'm asking for the one point from Hashem, ota avakesh, that's what I'm asking for, right? The point, the tachlit, the echad, the essential point of everything, to be connected there. When I can be connected there, I can almost withstand anything. What do I want? Shivti b'veit Hashem kol yemei chayai. That whatever's happening to me in the internal experiences, I'm attacked by doubt, by self-sabotage, by low self-esteem, by self-loathing, by gava, right, arrogance, but all these things that are attacking me on the inside. Chas v'shalom, but it happens, right? Or outer circumstances, right? I'm dealing with relationships with other people, with jobs, with money, with children, all the things that Yaakov is learning to interface with this year. He says, right? David HaMelech says, I can get through anything if I have what? Connection to the essential point of oneness, right? What is this for? What is it building? What is it? It's growing my consciousness, right? It's healing, it's building. It doesn't seem like it right now, right? It says, Achat sha'alti me'et Hashem, ota avakesh shifti b'veit Hashem kol yemei chayai. By the way, it's very significant, right? Shifti b'veit Hashem. Remember that Yaakov Avinu is the level of bayit. He's the level of home. Avram Avinu is the mountain. Yitzchak Avinu is the field. And by mountain, we mean, yes, a literal mountain, but we also mean mountaintop consciousness, right? It's very different to have a mountaintop experience, to have a field experience, and to have a home experience. You'll notice that Kislev and all of these Parshiot are going to keep reinforcing, how do I live this consciousness at home? What that means, it's going to be in the most intimate of areas of my life, in the most intimate stories, in the most intimate situations. And then also, what is the path back to home, refuge within myself, right? And it's again and again, we're going to light the Hanukkah candles at home. We're going to be rededicating the Beit HaMikdash, which is Beit Bait, right? The home of Kedusha. And these are all these stories about Yaakov Avinu trying to build a home and find his place. And Al Pi Masha Mar Chazal, according to what the holy masters taught us, Im pagal becha menavel ze mashkehu leveit hamidrash. Right? This is a little bit what we talked about in the beginning, or why we're even doing class tonight, right? That when doubts and confusion and negativity come at us, which it was doing to me yesterday and today, he says, drag him, right? In other words, drag these doubts and voices and inner attacking negative energies to the Beit Midrash. In other words, bring it to a place of light, add light. Sometimes we just can't directly deal with the darkness. So add light, just add light. ויקשו בזה, מה יועיל לו אם יכניסו לבית המדרש, הרי גם שם המנבל נמצא עמו. He says, 1 second, what did you get out of it? If he says, if negativity attacks you, take the negativity to the Beit Midrash. Right?
But where does it say that? Can you give me the exact word?
Yeah, it says, Im yachnisu, sorry. Okay, so it's the Gemara of Sukkah, Daf Nun Bet Amud Bet. Im paga becha menavel zeh, he means the Yetzer Hara, Satan, whatever you want to call it, but let's just call it our own negativity, right? Mashkehu leveit midrash, drag him to the Beit Midrash, right? This is the Talmud's formula, right? If negativity is coming and attacking you, right, take the negativity and get yourself, go learn some Torah.
Yeah.
So he says, Ikshuba said, this is difficult to understand. Ma yo'ilo im yachnisu lebeit hamidrash harei gam sham menavel nimtza imo. He says, wherever you go, there you are, right? This is a saying we have in 12 steps, right? So I'm full of negativity. I take myself to the base medrash and I'm sitting and learning Torah, but I'm still there with my negativity. Says, what did I accomplish, right? Ella, but Perush mashkehu leveit hamidrash hu sheyachnis betoch המסגרת הקדושה וישמור לבל ייפול מחוצה לה. He says, no. He says, even if I'm being attacked by negativity, go somewhere where there's an energy of Kedusha. There's an energy of intimacy with Hashem. There's an energy of the desire for the relationship and the connection and the desire to be in the loving and devotional service. Just she'amnam. היצר הרע נמצא גם בבית המדרש, אך כיוון שהוא נמצא בתוך המסגרת של קדושה, יש עליו שמירה שלא ייפול. Says, yes, it's true. We can schlep our negativity around with us. Says, but when we try to connect ourselves into Kedusha, right? I've been living this, like it's been a beautiful, incredible outpouring of support and love, unbelievable, yet through my birthday. And of course, because of all that, there's also been, vayifga b'makom, right? Hitting my inner walls. And he says, what happens when you hit the inner wall? Ma noah hamakom hazeh. Connect into the Kedusha. Connect into the Kedusha. Something holy is happening here. Something deep is being grown here. Something powerful is being birthed here. וזהו פירוש אחת שאלתי מאת השם, אותה אבקש, שבתי בבית השם כל ימי חיי, שתמיד יהיה בתוך מסגרת הקדושה ולא יתנתק ממנה, ועל ידי זה יש עליו שמירה עליונה בכל עניינו, בבחינת והנה השם ניצב עליו לשומרו. Question, comment. Oh, yeah, question. Okay. Is it possible that we do more damage and pain than good on our journey intentionally or not. Oh, goodness. Okay, well, what you're touching on is a question in the Gemara. Would it be better or worse for us to, would it be better if we never would have been born? Or is it better that we're born? And this is a discussion in the Gemara, and it has a slightly darker tone, and it says it would have been better if we were never born. But now that we're here, how do we integrate and how do we elevate? Now, and then it says, right, we're born against our will and we die against our will. And we have to remember that nothing's black and white in Kabbalah and Chassidut. These are parts, right? The part of the experience feels like, wow, it's really hard. It would have been better if we never would have been born. And part of it is, but our neshama chose to come here, and our neshama wants to elevate, and our neshama wants to help each other. So your question is, can we, bye, sweetheart, can we do more damage and pain than good on our journey, intentionally or not? We can, but I think it's important to remember that Nitzav Alav Hashem, right? That we always have tshuva available to us in any moment, in any second, right? And what tshuva does is elevates all those experience, it composts them into really great, delicious, rich soil that to grow further wholeness and healing and consciousness and love. So what you're saying is like, can we come here and add pain and suffering? We do, and we all do against our will, right? How many of us have the best intentions as wives, the best intentions as mothers, and yet we know that we caused suffering, not only to ourselves, but to our partners, to our children, right? So God forbid that could feel very heavy and lead us into Yeush, right? Chas v'shalom. So I would say that when we say Ein Shum Yeush Ba'olam Klal, what we're saying is, as soon as we have the consciousness that all the downs and the ups, we can use them to grow and elevate and integrate consciousness. As soon as we say that, we activate the Hashem Nitzav Elav. Something bigger is holding this story, something that knows our limitations, something that knows our blocks, something that knows our veils, and still is holding the story in chen, in great love, in great patience, in great compassion, and knows exactly what our capabilities are, and is there almost, I'm going to really say, cheering us on and holding the space of emunah, right? That's also what we mean by Hashem Nitzav. What is that energy? That's always keter, the emunah of like, I see and I believe and I know what's being built here and what's getting revealed here. And it's much bigger than the individual pain and suffering that we cause ourselves and each other. Questions or comments? Let me check the chat box. Thank you. Any more questions? So we'll be, I kind of really want to do another piece. Okay, so I think what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to end this recording. I'm going to end the meeting, and I'm going to get immediately back on to the same link so that it'll be a different class. So the people who are listening will have a separate class and a separate topic. And we're going to come back and we're going to talk about Yaakov rolling the Evan off of the well. Okay, so any last questions in this class? Okay, so I'm going to stop the recording.